I'm Joanne Law, Director of Studies for Mediation Institute and co-founder of Interact Support. I'm on a mission to prevent violence by training and supporting dispute resolution practitioners. Mediation Musings is a series of conversations with mediators and for mediators. So if you're interested in dispute resolution, follow the channel. We're intending to update new recordings each week. Enjoy. Thank you. I'd like to really welcome you, Maree. So this is Maree, or Dr Maree Harris, who is a specialist in working with people, I suppose, particularly around leadership. So your business is called People Empowered. And why did you choose that name?
Well, actually, I didn't choose it.
Okay.
I had when I decided to set up this business, this leadership business, I went to 11 of my former women leader clients who I'd been doing coaching with. And I asked them for ideas about what to call my new business. And nearly every one of them said, well, you have to have the word empowered in it, because that's how we felt when we worked with you. And when I actually went online and put in empowered, and people seemed to be in front of it, so I called it People Empowered.
That's a very good way to come up with it. Ask your clients how they.
And that's really what I'm on about. You know, empowering. Empower. Well, you can't really empower people. They've got to empower themselves. But you can set up an environment which is quite empowering for people, so that in that space, you can have a conversation with them, and in which they leave feeling, yes, I can do this.
Yeah, and look, that's very much why I wanted to have a chat with you for Mediator Musings. So the work you're doing isn't mediation. However, the crossover is, as mediators, that's very much our role. We need to empower both people to be able to make decisions, important decisions for their future.
Because you probably noticed, Joanne, in your mediation work, that most people resist being told what to do.
Yes, I have noticed that.
Unless it really resonates with them. But if they're helped to feel empowered to make the decisions for themselves,
yes.
And are given focus and direction, that when people are empowered, they usually go ahead and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And in our training, we sort of take away that crutch of being the expert and telling people what to do. So, we don't want our mediators doing that. We want them to be supporting the clients to come up with their own ideas and then consider the pros and cons of them and so on.
I think the other thing about empowered and empowerment is that one of the easiest ways to feel empowered is to surround yourself with other empowered and empowering people.
Yes.
It's pretty hard to be empowered by yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Particularly today,
yes,
in the sort of changing, challenging, unpredictable environment we're living in. You know, it's very easy to become quite disempowered very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's the. I'm actually reading a book called Holding Tight, Letting Go, Raising Healthy Kids in Anxious Times. And I think that's what you're referring to. It is an anxious time. There's lots of concerns about the future that probably most people do have to some degree.
Yes. Oh, sure. Yes. At every level of our cycle, really, every age group has that sort of challenge. It's interesting, as you say, we would never, certainly in my day, and probably yours too, that we never ever thought that children were anxious.
No, it just
You know,
yeah.
in fact, we didn't think they felt anything.
No, well,
But the fact now that we're acknowledging that even children are finding the current world in which they're living quite challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got mental health issues for very young children, anxiety disorders, depression, things that really weren't, or maybe they were more of an issue, and we just ignored it with children. We've been we've been through the Royal Commissions, the institutional abuse and those sort of things. So perhaps there was a bit of a naivety in the past in some regards. I'm not sure. But
I think that's very true, Joanne. We did ignore it. And I'm sure your mediators find this too, but I certainly, when I had my counselling and psychotherapy practice, I was often dealing with people whose issues were current, but in the background was unresolved and unrecognised issues from their childhood.
Yeah.
And that were never acknowledged back then, but have gone on to be problems in their adult relationships.
Yeah.
So I think all the more why we should be acknowledging children's issues now, so that is not repeated in this new generation.
Yeah, oh, look, very, very much so. I think part of what we all need to be doing is trying to break those cycles, because we know how important the environment that children grow up in is, in terms of how their brains become structured and how reactive they are. There's a lot that can be done to try and help children to have a better start in life. And parents that can't necessarily know how to do things, a way that's best for their children, because they don't have that experience themselves.
That's right. Yes, very much so.
With your work with leaders as having a lot to do with soft skills.
That's right. Very contested word.
Yeah. When we were having a chat before, you talked about how the focus on soft skills has changed over time, or over the time you've been working in this area.
Yeah, in 2008 I started working in this area, and at that time there was a page and a half of references on Google. If you typed in soft skills, you got a page and a half.
Yeah.
Whereas now there's something like 43 million references to it.
Okay.
And I think a lot of professional people feel it's unprofessional. The idea of softness is seen as a weakness, actually.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily use it all the time, but in the media, on the web, in journals, in magazines, even in the newspapers, it's constantly being used by, quite prominent, like the Wall Street Journal, the Harvard Business Review, by firms like Hayes and Korn Ferry and McKinsey, and a lot of those very big organisations are referring to use of soft skills. And I think it's used actually as a comparison to hard skills. Like, hard skills are the industry-specific technical skills that you need to do the job that you're qualified to do. And all the other skills are the soft skills. And I see them as the skills that actually enhance your personality, your attitude, your behaviour and your mindset. So when we talk about someone as lacking soft skills, it's usually that they put too much emphasis on their hard skills, and that their personality or their attitudes or their mindset gets in the way of them being effective.
Yeah.
And when they're told they need to develop their soft skills, it's those sort of things they've got to deal with. And you can't really teach them in the same way you teach the hard technical skills.
Yeah, that's right. Do this, do that, the other. Yeah, the technical skills are usually a sequence, whereas attitude and mindset is a different thing, isn't it?
Yes, and they need to be learned really in interaction with other people. So small groups, coaching, mentoring, all of those modes of learning are the best way to learn soft skills.
Yeah. Yeah, because it really is about being able to react in the moment, rather than go off and analyse it, and which is probably why people that are very competent technically can find themselves more challenged in that.
Well, when I first started in this area, there were two main groups I began to work with. One was highly skilled technical people who were promoted to management because of their technical skills.
Yes.
But for the first time in their lives, they experienced failure because they couldn't manage their people. They couldn't manage their teams. And people began to leave the organisation, and they left because of the manager.
Yeah.
And they didn't, it's that old adage, people join organisations and they leave managers.
Yes.
And that sense that particularly here in Australia, the only way people have traditionally been able to advance their careers is to advance into management. But not everybody's a manager.
No, that's
some people are very good at R&D, they're, research and development. They're better to be the technical expert, and we need organisations that provide status and increasing in salary for those technical experts.
Yeah.
And the other group was young people who were highly skilled technically, and highly skilled academically, but were missing out on all the jobs because they saw other young people who didn't have anywhere near their academic qualifications getting the jobs. And the reason was because they had these great soft skills. They could get on with other people. They could, lead other people. They could work well with other people. They could collaborate. They could inspire. They had good attitudes. They were great to be around, great people skills, all of that type of thing.
Yeah. And and look, you're describing people that we have in mediation frequently.
Yes.
because the resentments start to build up, the frustration. You end up with issues in their team. So there might be interpersonal issues between staff members that the manager hasn't got the skills to deal with, and so they ignore them and let them fester until there's an unacceptable outburst or something like that, and then the mediators are called in.
Yes. Yes. Oh, for sure. And in many ways, that's why I went into this area, because even in my counselling and psychotherapy practice, most of the issues were exactly around this type of thing. People unable to communicate, people without any self-awareness of how they'd contributed to what was happening in their lives.
Yeah.
People with no resilience to bounce back, just blaming, criticising, putting down one, just not having those skills to work through stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the success of the mediation process is that we actually artificially force some of those skills into the interaction.
Yes.
We if people are being reactive, rather than allowing that, we slow them down and say, what did you hear that person saying, and get them to confirm that they've actually heard, because often they're not listening.
Yes.
because they're feeling defensive. So
Well, we often think of communication, don't we, as verbal, but listening is an extremely important part of communication.
Yeah.
And most of us listen to reply. We don't listen to understand.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine, as you're saying, in mediation, it's really important to get people to listen, to understand the other person.
Yeah, and the only way we're going to know if they've understood is, ask them what was that message. So
that mirroring back process of mirror back what you've heard.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a
say.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to overuse it. Sometimes when students are learning it, they make the poor person do it for every single interaction. It's like you're like a ball boy in tennis who's going out, grabbing the ball and running it to the other side of the net every time.
Yes, that's
right. We're trying to empower these people to do that themselves. So where we can back off, we do, but only as much as we need to be confident that they are actually communicating effectively.
Yes.
Yeah, just because they're speaking words doesn't mean that they're actually communicating, getting their message across, I suppose.
That's right, yes.
So that's certainly one area of your, where you're working at the moment, helping leaders to understand, maybe where they do need to strengthen their skills in that area. Is that
Yes, and in this soft skills area, it depends on, the skills are not the same right across the board. Like most people, when they think of soft skills, they think of people skills. Now they're pretty fundamental and basic.
Yeah.
And the sort of soft skills that a school leaver needs, like dressing appropriately for their job, arriving on time, like things that we never ever thought were even issues are now quite big issues. You've got to teach young people how to do this.
Yeah.
Being able to get on with other people, being collaborative and cooperative. But then you get up to, say, the leadership level that I'm working at, they've got, you expect they've got all those things. So the main skills are the interpersonal challenges. It's how they manage their people. And I believe that you've got no right to be wanting to lead other people if you can't already lead yourself. So the soft skills, the first lot of soft skills for leaders are the self-leadership skills. So they're things like the self-management skills, like they've got to be self-aware. They've got to know how they're coming across to other people.
Yeah.
What makes them tick, what presses their buttons, and be acutely aware of that. Things like emotional intelligence, how you manage your emotions in a mature, responsible way. Things like being proactive rather than reactive to situations. Those sort of more advanced resilience, being able to bounce forward, so important today when we've got such unpredictability all around us. It's that psychological strength that they need to develop to be able to handle whatever's thrown at them, move forward and become a much stronger individual. Those sort of skills are the skills that leaders are needing today.
Yeah, and they're absolutely the skills that mediators need.
Yes.
Because unless we have self-awareness, unless we understand, what's us and what's reaction to the clients, and whether, we can facilitate a process where we've got unconscious bias creeping in, where we're negatively influencing the process for one of the people because we're aligning, all sorts of things that we can do if we lack awareness.
Oh, that's so true. But the thing is, it's very difficult to develop self-awareness by yourself. In fact, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, you need feedback.
As someone said the other day, it's like looking backwards without turning around. You know, you can't Can't do it. You've got to have either a coach or a mentor who'll challenge you, or you're with a group of highly respected colleagues, you know, a small group that you meet with on a regular basis, who you give permission to one another to challenge you, and where you can acknowledge, you know, I know that I'm not going too well with this group of people, and I think maybe there's things I'm doing here. You know, it's not all them, maybe it's me.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to acknowledge some of that, and have people help you, become more self-aware.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I wanted to actually ask you, because your PhD thesis was entitled Being a Reflective Practitioner in an Age of Uncertainty, which sort of goes back full circle, doesn't it?
It does, yes, because I have a very strong belief. One of the most important skills for success today is being able to be reflective.
What do you mean by that? Could you maybe just explain?
Well, there's actually two ways to be reflective. The way that most people have understood, well, I should say first, I belonged to a youth group where reflection was very much part of our action, looking at our lives and what was happening in them, how we wanted to respond. From the age of about 18 onwards. And I've always been a very reflective person, and I thought it was just a natural characteristic of people. And when I started my counselling and psychotherapy practice, I was absolutely shocked at how few people reflect. They whinge, they complain, they ruminate, they blame, they criticise.
Project, yeah.
Project. Very few people actually say to themselves, what's happening here? Why am I feeling this way?
I agree with you.
Why am I reacting like this? What's this lump I've got inside my chest? You know, why am I so angry about this? Very few people do that. That ability to look at yourself and look at what you're doing is it's reflection on our situation. You know, and even there are all sorts of ways people can do that and need to do it. And Marshall Goldsmith, who's probably the most prominent executive coach in the world, he actually has someone ring him every night and ask him a series of questions. You would think someone like him wouldn't need to do this.
Yeah.
About how did I go today? I can't remember them offhand, but if anybody wants to look this up, they can go to his website and they're all there. But he asks, how did I go today? Did I treat people well? And he has about 5 questions. And he says, someone said to him, well, do you really need to do that? Aren't you very self-aware? And he said, I am very self-aware. But he said, I need someone to call me to account every day.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as you're saying that.
Reflecting on my work and my practice.
The accountability.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
so that's the reflection on. But what's becoming much more important today in the area of exponential change, where the change is just rolling change and it never stops.
Yes.
And things are coming out of left field. Many leaders have to do as much unlearning of their leadership styles as they do of developing new ones.
Yeah.
It's reflecting in the situation. So something comes from out of left field that they've never dealt with before, that they haven't got an answer for, and right there on the spot, they have to go through a reflective process about how I'm going to answer, what I'm going to do here. And I imagine mediators find that too. That
very much.
No matter how experienced you are, every now and then someone throws you a doozy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you come, there's unlimited variety of ways people live their lives and manage to get in conflict.
And sometimes you actually have to say, look, can I get back to you on that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure what's happening there. Let me get back to you. And you've got to then make sure that you do get back to them on it, that you don't leave it hanging loose. But that reflecting in the situation is becoming a very important thing. It's what we call, and a new skill that's developing for leaders is agile thinking. That organisations have to be much more agile. There's no way you can, for example, say let's set up a task force on this and we'll work on this for 3 months and produce a report to see what we need to do, because by that time 3 or 4 other organisations have jumped in ahead of you and you've lost the game. Yeah,
absolutely. So who was it? CPA association, I think. I was at a presentation by someone on knowledge management. They're doing a fabulous job, and but their motto was fail fast, fail cheap, and learn.
Yes.
So just be constantly monitoring what you're doing. If it's not working, adjust.
Yes.
Don't put a huge expensive solution in before you know if it's going to work.
Yeah. Very challenging for the perfectionist.
Extremely challenging for the perfectionist.
To be able to, it's a whole, and this is, when you come back to talking about soft skills, perfectionists who really thought that was a prized skill once professionally,
it's
now are people losing out at the moment.
That's
because
fascinating.
they are unlikely to be promoted because they're not agile enough. They take too long to do things. We need a report tomorrow, but they need a week to do it, and because they've got to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and so they are. And this is another example of people who've been praised all their life for what they've done are now finding that they're losing out. They're a failure.
It's fascinating because it certainly is an issue, and I do know a few perfectionists that that do find change and very challenging when things are changing all the time.
Yes.
So what advice do you give someone like that? How do you help them to increase their flexibility?
They need to recognise that their perfectionism is a problem for them. That's the starting point, and to why it is a problem, because usually the perfectionist, what is only 80% good enough for them is 120 for most other people.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit of a lack of ability to distinguish the important from the less important.
Yes.
Everything is massively important, whereas if they were able to prioritise, well, this bit, this is, the consequence of getting this wrong is going to be dire, whereas the consequence of getting this wrong is, we'll fix it up and
And they're often competing with someone.
Yeah.
And
maybe
the competition might go back to when they were 3 years of age,
Yeah.
And sometimes their first children, who've grown up with a whole lot of expectations on them.
Yep.
Because you often find that second and third children flow more easily than the first child does. So
well, that's right. The first one's job is to teach the parents to chill out a bit, and
exactly.
that's my theory. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think this is a good example, I think, that managers particularly, if you've got someone who's very good at what they do, but has some characteristics or traits like perfectionism that are actually hampering their development. If you've got a good manager, that manager will usually be able to help them through that.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I had a case recently of a CEO who came to me about one of his staff who, working in a technical area, but he'd write 15-page reports on the situation when all the rest of his staff would write 2 pages.
Yeah.
And he'd present these 15-page reports to the client. And, of course, the client
doesn't want that.
Couldn't understand it for a start.
Yeah.
And didn't need 15 pages. They just needed 2.
Yeah.
And so he was able, and the attitude when he raised this with this person, this professional, was, so you want me to do a rough job, do you? You know, that's how he saw his perfectionism being challenged. He'd have to do a rough job. And he said, no, I just want you to do a job that's going to meet the needs of the client.
Yeah.
So he was able, for about the next 4 or 5 reports he wrote, he actually sat down with him and edited them for him.
Okay.
And actually showed him what needed to be in it. And but that takes a lot of time for a busy manager to do that.
Absolutely.
So you'd only do it for someone probably who had real ability and you didn't want to lose from your organisation. So it's a bit of that practical, and it's the same with nearly every soft skill. It's someone who will actually spend some time with them, helping them to develop that skill and work on where the issue is for them in that, not having that skill.
Yeah, and look, it's a challenge. So within workplace mediation, generally, if a mediator's called in, an external mediator's called in, it's because the organisation does value the staff and they don't want to lose them. I mean, occasionally they call us in as part so that they can document that they've followed a proper procedure, which is a bit disappointing because anyway, but in most cases it's because they do genuinely value the employees and they want to keep them. So helping.
And I think there is those sort of people, whether it's the manager or the mediator or the counsellor, psychologist, whoever it is, has to actually put towards the person how this is impacting their career development and their professional advancement.
Yeah.
And that if they really are wanting to move ahead, they really do have to work on this and give them those reasons about the sort of world we're working in now, that, you know, you can't take a week to write a report.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you really do want to continue to do this job, then you really need to, these are skills you now have to develop. And directly ask them, is that where you want to go? You know, are you wanting to continue to work in this area?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, in some ways, as a mediator, we are encouraging reflection by the parties, by those questions that we ask, particularly during the preparation, the pre-mediation, where we can really encourage them to think about, because what I've found with conflict is that it kind of takes on a life of its own and sweeps people along.
Yes.
And so they get their view of the other person becomes really polarized. They become devil incarnate, and all of, these terrible things. And so, helping them to reflect a little bit on their role in the conflict.
I did a lot of marital and relationship counselling, and one of the things that used to, and of course that's just full of conflict.
Yes.
But one of the issues that was quite common was that at that time when I was doing, I think the statistics have increased now, but it was 33% of first marriages were breaking up, but 50% of second.
Yeah.
And all the research was showing that the reason for a greater number of second ones breaking up was that the person never looked at themselves to see what they'd contributed to the breakup of the first one.
Yep.
So no self-awareness. So just went on and repeated all the same behaviour all over again in the second one.
Oh.
And it would only be after the second one broke up that then they might have been ready to look at themselves. But the first one, it was all the other person's problems.
Yeah.
They were the ones responsible for this, I've done everything right, and, they didn't have that degree of self-awareness and weren't even prepared to acknowledge their role in it, even when there was some reflection.
If you're just blaming someone else, you've completely disempowered yourself because you've got no power to make anything different.
Yes, yes.
That's not a good place to be.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so that's certainly that whole language around victim and perpetrator and just putting people in those two boxes is problematic.
Yes, certainly.
From that perspective that we're looking at. Whether or not it's true, it's just not helpful.
Well, it's
whose truth?
Yes, it's another contested word.
It really is. Yeah, I tend to prefer perspective than truth. It's true for you based on where you were looking and what filters you were using.
That's right. Yeah.
From your point of view, knowing that it's mediators that are listening, what do you think is maybe what you'd like them to take away? Or
I think that self-awareness is a big one for mediators.
Yeah.
It's a big one for leaders. Anybody who's working directly with people and wants to influence them.
Yeah.
Wants to bring out the best version of themselves, and that's really what mediators are wanting to do. They're wanting the people to come out being the best version of themselves, to work to an outcome that's
that's not petty, but actually looking at a better future for them.
Yeah,
for both of them.
For both, yes, win-win solutions.
Absolutely.
Now, when you're doing that, it's equally important to tune in to what's happening for yourself in this process. In counselling and psychotherapy, we talk about transference and countertransference, whereas you can be sitting with someone where the person you're with transfers onto you what they're actually feeling, and you need to take that seriously. So you can sit there with someone and you can feel yourself becoming, for example, quite anxious as you're listening to them.
Yeah, or angry.
Angry, yes, angry or fearful. Or even depressed, oh God, you can feel a weight on your shoulders.
Yes.
That's a very common one where there's, and I imagine mediators find this, where no one's shifting.
Yeah.
They won't move.
Yes.
And
you can start to feel very frustrated.
Identify that in yourself. If you can identify that feeling, sometimes you can transfer that back to you. You know, you can transfer that back to the people. You can, and again, this comes with a bit of an experience, because the feeling might be yours because I'm inexperienced and I'm feeling anxious and I don't know what to do here, and you know.
Yes.
So you can be transferring your own stuff back.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
But when you've become a bit experienced and you're truly listening to understand, and you are beginning to feel a real weight on your shoulders to be able to come back and say, this sounds as if you're both feeling this is far too hard to deal with.
Mm.
If you're experienced, they'll probably say, yeah, I don't think we're ever going to be able to resolve this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is very much the case. You can't resolve it, but we can help people to manage it better.
Mm. Yeah.
And
although my instinct,
we shift the focus from trying to resolve it to getting them to accept, look, we are not going to be able to resolve this, but can we at least work constructively together, because we're both in the same organisation, or we're both the parents of these kids, or whatever, and then what can we do to work?
At least turn the dial back.
Yes, yes.
You know,
but that can come from that awareness of yourself in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're anxious, you're keeping some sort of mental or actual tally of success in a mediation, then you're bringing in your own agenda, your own needs, and that's.
And sometimes, Joanne, if they're not sure whether this is my stuff or the client's stuff, they need to go away and talk to their coach, their mentor, someone, and say, look, I've got these two I'm working with in a workplace mediation at the moment, and the moment they walk in the door, my heart starts pounding. And I absolutely dread every session I'm having with them. And I've had 5 already, and I feel as if I'm achieving. So they need to go to someone, because they obviously can't connect into what's happening for them themselves.
No. So if that's the case, look, the reality is that often people are attracted to mediation because, particularly family dispute resolution, because they've been through their own family breakup, and they either saw the mediators and thought, that's fantastic, I'd love to do that, or they saw them and thought, oh, I could do better than that, whatever motivation. But often they've got their own stuff that may not be fully resolved, and it's quite easily triggered as well. So you've got the workplace context where they just get sucked in and stuck, but sometimes, we've also had people come who've been victims of the workplace bullying, and they've had a payout, they've had they've kind of exited their industry and moved into mediation, and that's another area where it'd be very valuable for them to have a coach, a mentor, a supervisor, or whatever.
Because payouts are hollow victories. In any area of the justice system, generally the payout is satisfying. It feels like a win for a very short period of time. But unless the underlying stuff has been resolved, it quickly wears off and they're back to where they were before they ever got the payout.
Yeah, and look, it's unfortunate in our industry as mediators that there isn't mandatory supervision the way there is with counselling and psychology and others. So we really need to rely on practitioners to be self-aware enough to realise when they need that.
Yes. Yes.
We've got group video group supervision with Mediation Institute, so people can come along. But sometimes you need that one-on-one, a deeper, safer place.
Yes. Yes.
So,
And it is interesting though, Joanne, because I have done a lot of what I call consultative supervision. So it's people, senior people, experienced people consulting with me about their work.
Okay.
That it used to traditionally be psychologists, counsellors, psychotherapists, people in the human service sector
Yes.
who got supervision. But there's increasing numbers of professions now that are seeing this as a valuable thing, like teachers, ministers of religion, even nurses who get clinical supervision of their nursing work, but haven't traditionally been given this supervision of their personal practice, the personal style, or
I think we need a better name for it. What do you think?
Well, look, I've always called it consultative supervision, and I have written a short booklet on this explaining what I mean about that, that they're consulting about their practice. So it's seen as an empowering thing for them.
Yeah.
And it's not, there's no evaluative or assessment.
Yeah, it's not a superior
to my thing. But I'm finding that some of the organisations that traditionally would come for supervision are now getting me to act as a mentor. They use that word. Or to run group mentoring sessions for their teams.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah.
And it's much the same process, in fact.
Yeah.
In both situations as the way I do it anyhow. It's much the same process.
Yeah. Yeah. There's someone else is using the term positive supervision as well to get away from that boss telling correcting you.
Well, that's yes. And supervision, back in the 1920s, the miners in Scotland fought for the right to wash off the day's dust, coal mine dust, before they went home.
Yeah.
And to do it in work time.
Okay.
And really, that is what supervision and people who request supervision from their organisations is about. It's within work time that I am given the opportunity to wash off the days, to debrief, to wash off the day's pressures and stresses, particularly in my work with other humans, with other people, because carrying all those stresses, and some of them are horrific. If you're working in, the area of sexual abuse or family violence or some of those areas, those workers are carrying around enormous burdens of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely,
Absolutely need supervision. And it's interesting that one of the sexual abuse units in the Department of Human Services a couple of years ago was fined something like $200,000 by WorkSafe for not providing supervision to their staff.
Oh, really?
It's an occupational health and safety issue now.
Yeah, and so it should be, because we know that emotions are sticky, and you know, we can get emotional ties. We know enough about you know, post-traumatic stress disorder
Yes, yes.
and vicarious
Liability, vicarious
um,
trauma. Yes.
trauma. Yeah, so that you know, these are real things. They're not someone being weak. They're not something, you know, it's not
Mm,
a judgment on the
mm,
person that's
mm.
feeling that way. It you
Yeah.
know, this is what
And
happens.
we're seeing more and more organisations that I don't think are dealing with this. So
Yeah.
we've had the federal police, for example, just in recent weeks, a number of, I think 4 last year suicided, 4 federal police.
Yeah.
We've got magistrates here in Victoria suiciding.
Yeah.
We've got school principals here in Victoria suiciding. And those organisations, when this begins to happen, they put in counselling.
Mm.
And in many cases, counselling is not successful.
Yeah.
Because anybody who's a professional and regards them as highly skilled,
Mm.
and it's the highly skilled ones that are suiciding,
Yes.
it's not the people who are not very successful. It's the highly successful ones who are suiciding. One of the, I think, they don't want to admit that they're not coping.
Yeah.
And so they keep pushing themselves and putting on a great front in front of their colleagues, so their colleagues don't even recognise what's happening for them.
Mm.
And then everybody is really surprised when it happens. Whereas getting in early and offering those groups a group mentoring program, I think is very, very helpful, because what happens there is they begin to hear that in this small group of 6, everybody's feeling exactly the same way as I am. This is not my problem.
Yeah.
I am not a failure. It's not me not coping. Everybody is experiencing the pressure of this job.
Yeah.
And then they start with a good facilitator, a good mentor. You can help them to share their experience with one another. So it's not the mentor. I often talk about myself being the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage.
Yep.
So you guide them through and you use their own experiences to help one another change the way they deal with them.
Yeah.
So they become more resilient. They develop better emotional intelligence. They get better work-life flow and all those things that have been very challenging, that eventually lead them to mental health problems and maybe suicide, are prevented.
Yeah. And
so I think there's a lot more work we need to do in this area, but it all starts with self-awareness, I believe.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation with you, so that the mediators out there understand that people like you exist, because it's not our role as the mediator to be that guide on the side, but we often identify that there's that need within an organisation, that there's a void there, that people are feeling very alone and blaming themselves for what they're feeling, rather than recognising that it's kind of something that's a byproduct of the work that they're doing.
Yes.
And
yes.
that, you know, there's ways that it can be dealt with. There's ways that it can, you know, they can clean themselves off at the end of the day. But you know, if they don't have those skills, then they're not going to be able to do it, and they'll take it home and take it out on the wife, or the husband, or the children, and because you know, often these workplace stresses spill off, you know, into the home as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it's no, look, it's fantastic, and I'm going to have to stop because of the just the time. But it's been wonderful to talk to you. Now, are you comfortable with me putting links to your website and
Yes,
connections, so
very, very
people
comfortable to
would
do
like
that.
to follow up with you, they
Yes,
can do so.
yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you once again.
Right. Thanks, Joanne. Bye.
Bye.